What's the first thing you tell yourself when you wake up in the morning?
Say your prayer. What day is it? Is this Sunday or is this Saturday?
I think my first thought, Sean, is I'm just grateful that I have another day. One more day. If that's all, at least I want to try to make the best of that one more day. Awakening in the morning for me is, and since we've had some dealings with ill health, I'm just grateful for one more day. Really and truly.
What were some of the old-fashioned remedies for illness that you remember growing up?
Be careful what you say, Sean. We still use them.
That's
No. I had rheumatic fever as a baby, and I think as a result I would get coughs often. And I remember my mom making a mustard plaster. So you put this mustard spread on a piece of cheesecloth and put it on your chest, and that supposedly helps to relieve the congestion. I tried it on him a few months ago, and I didn't know how to do it, and it didn't work.
Oh dear.
That was one thing.
My mother used to, if one of us got a sore throat, she'd swab our throat with methylate.
Mercurochrome.
She used both.
Oh.
Methylate was stronger than mercurochrome.
You probably don't know what that is.
Well, it wasn't a pleasant experience.
Just a
It would
little-
probably be considered poison now.
A little bottle of liquid, kind of reddish color, that you had a little dipper down in, and you could put it on cuts or whatever. But the go inside his throat. Mm.
Yeah. I had scarlet fever when I was 9 years old. Scarlet fever was feared in those days. And I'm not sure it was the disease that was feared so much as what the surprise after effects, the side effects of the disease was going to be. My father had it when he was about 10 years old also. And he was deaf for a year. And let's see, he would have been 7 because his mother took him to the Manti Temple to be baptized when he was 8. And he heard the prayer. That's the first thing he heard for a year. And when I had it, I was 9. And my mother and father took me to Salt Lake to a specialist. And he gave me very little hope of ever hearing. He said that the eardrums were damaged to such extent that he didn't think I would ever recover any hearing. But Mother took me to the bishop the Sunday following that visit, as I recall. It was soon after, and asked that the bishopric would administer to me, which they did. And we went back the next weekend to the doctor in Salt Lake. And I remember only one thing, and I can't remember for sure, but it seemed to me that he actually shed tears. I remember him referencing, or maybe my mother telling me, but the fact that he had always wanted to witness that kind of a miracle. But he established in their minds, at least, and in mine, a young kid, that my hearing was going to be good. When I took the tests at Hercules Powder Company, when I was employed there, I had to have a secret clearance for the government. And when I took the hearing test, the people who were administering that test said, "You do not have hearing. You have a radar system." Said I could hear sounds that no one else could hear. So truly that was a blessing for me to have my hearing restored. I suppose that most young men, when they're small, I'm not so sure that it anchors itself in their life for good, but I think most young men want to be like their dad. There are things about my father that I didn't, I didn't idolize. He was a smoker. And so I never wanted to smoke, but I remember idolizing him in a lot of different ways. So
as I look back, I'm thinking that my mother and my grandmothers, they were really good examples to me in so much that they loved to clean and cook, and so I admired them, and that I think because of that I've always loved cooking. And there was a woman in our ward, I think she was a return missionary. I can't remember her name, but she just set such a good example for me that I wanted to be like her. And then there's my grandfather, who's my mother's dad, who was a very, very religious man, and I think that he became one of my greatest heroes because he was always so religious and always having his prayers answered and always being called to administer to people and always being called to speak at funerals. And because he was that way, I wanted to have a husband that was the same way. And my dream came true for that because I got the same kind of husband.
there was one other individual that I would probably be remiss if I didn't mention. When I was in my later teens, probably 16, 17, I was asked to work with a gentleman in our ward who was he was a lover of boys. He was everybody's hero. And it turns out that he was at one point he'd been the town drunk. And he was always fighting and raising Cain. And finally the bishop got a hold of him and told him he wanted him to take over the Explorer Scouts, ages 14 to 18. And he just struggled with that. But it bothered him enough that he was asked to do it, that he decided to do it. He cleaned up his life, and he became an example to every kid in that town. He just was just a super guy. I never knew him to make a single promise or a commitment that he didn't keep. And he went through some rough times. I worked with him for a few years as an assistant to him. And he just lived the standard that he felt he wanted to exemplify for the boys that he worked with. He was just an incredible leader. And he was, we went on a lot of things. His troop, the people in our group, every one of us were in full uniform. I mean, right down to the spats on your shoes, everything. Full uniform. And we acted, of course he was a military guy, and he kind of brought that feeling into the group, that we had a loyalty that we had to live up to. And as a result of what he did, and what he did for me personally, he fit into my life when my dad couldn't. That was the hardest part.
Okay. Max, were you finished?
Yeah, well, I didn't mention Roy Davis's name, but he was the man that fit into my life at a time when my father couldn't. because of his health. It wasn't because he didn't want to. But my father's health became so poor that he was unable to do the things that he would have wanted to do with me and I wanted him to do. But Roy was there and filled in without taking any glory from my father. Very loyal to the family.